time, weather, and
Welcome to the Chey and Pav podcast experience.
case.
You're listening to The Chey and Pav Show, Teachers Talking Teaching. We are two middle school teachers sharing our reflections and insights about the topics that matter the most in the classroom. Join us in the hallway, the parking lot, or even in the staff room. Welcome to episode 134 of the Chey and Pav Show. Thank you for joining us as we sit around the table to talk teaching. In this episode, we discuss cell phones in the classroom. Are they useful, or should they be banned from learning spaces? These conversations and so many more will surely come up with this timely discussion. Before we jump into that chat, though, we should probably introduce ourselves. My name is Pav Wander, and I'm half of this dynamic duo. My co-host is on the couch next to me, but I'll let him introduce himself.
Lat pull downs, cable crunches, squats, hammer curls, deadlifts, bench press, reverse curl, leg press, bent over rows, cardio. Nah, we ain't doing no cardio. And I'm Chey, the Hurricane Chey. And as I introduce myself, and Pav, you introduce yourself, let us say that we need to reintroduce the Chey and Pav Show as Canadian Podcast Award 2023 Best Educational Series.
Winners.
Oh, did I not identify that we won?
No.
All right, Pav. Looking forward to this episode on cell phones. I'm glad the fact you talked about sitting here on the couch, because usually the couch is reserved for our live studio audience.
That's right.
Which we haven't sold a ticket yet. Like this is a premium suite. We can't sell these tickets, but it doesn't matter because if people had bought them this week, I would have told them at the door, "Nah, we ain't got room for you because you sold all your furniture."
I did. The furniture's all gone. So we're sitting on a couch with folding TV dinner tables.
I said, "Where are we recording?" He said, "Right here." I said, "Right where?"
Right where? There's no kitchen table. There's no coffee table. There's just a couch and some folding tables. That's it.
And 3 pillows that are keeping me from leaning over.
There will be new furniture soon. I'm just...
There can be no selfies with this episode.
I'm re-envisioning the space.
This is how we recorded episode 3.
Yeah.
The professional podcasters like, what? Pardon me? Podcast winners, yet recording on their couch on a coffee table?
I'm going through a few changes. And so things were getting a little tired around here. And so I just thought I'd get rid of everything and just start fresh. And that's what we do. It's going to be great in here soon.
The conversation usually goes, I'm thinking about, I just sold. What?
Just sold it. It's gone.
You haven't finished your thought about what you were thinking about, and you've already gone online.
No.
Posted 7 things for sale, and had 3 people pick them up, and Mo dropped one off.
You have to list the stuff well in advance. Like, I'm not purchasing any new furniture until the old furniture is gone and picked up. Because what if it doesn't sell, and I have all the new furniture just sitting around waiting to be built?
So the theme this week is we roughing it.
We are roughing it, but that's okay. We're making it work. Look, you can almost hear an echo in here. It's so empty.
You're right. I mean, not that we ever have been in a professional recording studio to ever record an episode. We do like Pav, to get serious off this note is we've often tried to wonder if we needed to have a more professional space.
Yes.
But then we risk losing the authenticity because, what's the signature of the Chey and Pav show when you think about where do we place ourselves in these educational podcasts? Well, we're two active teachers. These are the hallway conversations that teachers gravitate to, that teachers have every single day. And now we're just capturing them and creating that documentation of it. But if you were to be in a studio, then it's too much like a staff meeting. And then it seems like it's almost like too prepared. And not to say that our conversation wouldn't flow in a space like that, but I think of our own conversations about building a more robust, permanent space, we've always wondered, do we lose a little bit about who we are and our roots?
No, not if you develop the space to reflect who we are as authentic teacher podcasters that have a more casual vibe, conversational style. I mean, we've already kind of decided on what the studio is going to look like, and by we I mean I.
Everyone picked up on that.
It's already, it's in the works.
I couldn't believe you kept a straight face for like 4 seconds when you said we.
When you started laughing, I was like, you know what? The jig is up.
It's up.
Yeah.
So, Pav.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of big news.
Yes.
I don't even know if it's big news because we've talked about this project we've been working on for some time in sort of mild secrecy, and then it's coming, but it is now official.
It is.
We are big book authors.
Big book authors. We wrote a big book.
And the inside joke on that is, of course, we have published our first, I guess, teacher resource book, Amplifying Our Practice, Teachers Talking Teaching.
Yep.
I would say it's 10 people talking to us about topics that we thought were the most impactful or important to us as teachers.
Yeah.
Had some interviews, gave some anecdotes, very much structured in sort of like a weaving of a recorded an interview episode and one of our anecdotal episodes meshed into one to create these 10 chapters that each are real standalone pieces that you could bring to a staff or use it as a case study, or you could bring to your university course and not necessarily sign the entire text. You could do, we have them basically into three sections.
Yes.
And we called it Big Book because, our first publication's a picture book.
Yeah.
And for some reason, in the heat of the moment, I didn't know how do you announce the launching of your second book, but trying to differentiate it from the first book. So it's the Big Book.
Because a lot of people were like, "Oh, you guys wrote another picture book." No, it's not a picture book. There's actually no pictures in it. It's all words, and it's a lot of words. 10 chapters, as you mentioned. And it is, as you say, very, reflective of our style of podcast. We've included our own personal reflections in there, our own anecdotes, our own experiences as teachers for combined, almost 40 years of teaching, over 40 years or so. And it's a great way to sort of mesh that theory and practice together, which we talk about so much. We learn a lot from the experts in the field, which is something that you and I, Chey, we do for the podcast as well. But then we provide our own insights into what this actually looks like in practice. And we include a lot of those anecdotes in the book as well, in every chapter. And it was a lot of work. It was 4 years of work that we put into writing this book and making sure that we had all the right voices and that we spent a lot of time in the editing process and the development of this book, down to every last piece, like the font and the cover and all the little pieces are incredibly important to us. We've got a great foreword by Superintendent Debbie Donsky, which is phenomenal. We are so proud of that. We've got some incredible endorsements of the book with some pretty prominent people that we are very, very proud of. And so this is a huge accomplishment for us, and I'm very proud of it. I know that you are as well, and it's a huge deal, and we're really happy with sort of the feedback that we've been getting from people who have purchased the book and are sharing the book and are are reaching out to us to tell us about, the value that it brings to the classroom, to the school environment. And so we're really, really happy about that and proud of it.
I think it still plays into our sort of part of our signature is bringing academic work and making it accessible for teachers. Although I would say in regards to all of our work, this is probably the most daunting, the most detail oriented. Like you said, this took us a long time. This was a hard project. And we probably have the book 250 pages. There are 3 or 4 chapters that were written that just didn't make the final cut, or you and I just didn't like how they flowed naturally. Like months and months and months of work, and then it goes nowhere. Plus all kinds of other interviews, and not to talk about, what got edited out, but I guess authors will tell you produce so much work for a written piece, and how much doesn't make in, and how much time is consumed just on that portion alone. And Pav, at the end, I am super proud, and it's one of those things where when you create content, you really put yourself out there. Who's going to honor it? Who's going to surprise you and really find great value in it? Where do you feel a little let down, where you're sort of... I remember Kevin Leichman, when we were talking about him when we were writing a book, and one of the advice he gave is like, be careful. And I don't know if he said careful, just be mindful of some of those rah-rah supporters that when you finally produce your book, they won't be there, and don't let that sour your mood. And I think one of those things when you produce content like a podcast episode, but on a much smaller scale, when you put 4 years of work into something like and I don't know, Pav, we're going to do a whole episode on this. At first you were writing for someone else, and then as you wrote, it was so daunting and so challenging. You just started to write for yourself.
Yes.
And then at the end, and when you finally release it, and then it's a peak and valley of emotions. One day you're so excited because you're not that you were looking for the praise or the validation, but you know what? When you work hard on something for 4 years, a little bit of a comment, a thank you, a validation of this could be perfect for my staff, or this is going to be great here, really resonates. And when you don't get it, maybe from people you expected to get it, it stings a little bit. And you know what? Especially in our board, I assume these general themes throughout all, we always talk about honoring the genius of our students, find their joy, connect to their passions. And then when teachers manifest, and we're not the only teachers that are producing content, but I think we've had a lot of these side conversations. Then when teachers do the same thing, there's complete and utter silence all around. And when we talk about the hypocrisy of education, this is one of those spaces. We want our teachers to produce learning spaces that produced, based on certain philosophies and pedagogies. And then when teachers literally model it, become the mentor text for it, then it's complete silence.
I think, and you and I, we've had this conversation before. I think that educators, those in education who have done something similar, will know the work that goes into a project of this size. And those who don't, perhaps this is where that letdown comes from. Those who have never, embarked on a journey like this one, just they don't know how much of our heart and soul and energy, physical energy, emotional energy, intellectual energy, psychological energy goes into a project like this. And so when we don't get that validation right away, it's not to say that people don't value the work that we are doing. It's just they don't quite understand the amount of energy, the amount that we feel so completely drained after a project of this magnitude. And so I think that people who have gone through this process and know and understand what it's like, you tend to receive more validation from those folks who have gone through something similar or understand what this process is like and what it can do to a person's life. And I know I say this all the time, I give a lot of grace to people because you really don't know what they know and what they don't know. And I, to a fault, I do this. So I don't ever place blame on anyone. I don't ever feel like, well, you didn't buy the book, we're colleagues or whatever it might be. It just might be, you don't really know how much. Yes, you say congratulations. Yes, you say, wow, that's a great thing that you have done. But do you really know what I've had to sacrifice to write this book? I don't think you know. And if you knew, maybe you would value it a little bit more. So I give a lot of people grace on that. I probably am guilty of the same thing when it comes to many areas that I'm not familiar with. We talk about sports all the time. I'm not a very sporty person. I love fitness, but I am not sporty. So when we talk about competition, when we talk about sports, I don't have the same empathetic sort of like feelings that you do. I try, but I don't have the same understanding that you would of a certain, the way that a game went, or, the feeling, the letdown of not being able to accomplish something that you had aimed to do. So I can't offer the same sort of, the same sort of empathy that you would want from me, perhaps, right? That's my sports analogy of the day.
No, can't use that.
Yeah.
But Pav, we're going to come back to our book, and let's get back to the flip side. Rather than the deficit stores, we had it's a great project we're really proud of. 10 fantastic contributors, 10 fantastic chapters talking about all things social justice, reading and literature, assessment and documentation, and we'll talk more about that later. But now that we've spoken for 17 minutes, I don't need to go on a rant about all the stupidness I saw on Twitter.
Oh, no, I enjoy
Oh, you have
that.
one? I know.
No, I don't have one, but I'd love to hear some of yours.
It's actually going to come up in our conversation about cell phones. You're listening to the Chey and Pav show. Teachers talking,
Teaching.
We'll be right back.
Get your hands up to the floor.
And you're listening to the Chey and Pav show. And you're still here. It's fantastic. Don't worry. Pav will be back in a moment to keep you here.
I'm right here.
We're talking about cell phones. And Pav, this is an interesting conversation that I'm looking forward to having. So where did we end up here? Well, in Ontario, there's been sort of this premise in our local government to bring upon more rules and regulation of cell phones. And a couple years ago, they did a really mild one where they banned it, except to the discretion of your school and recess and lunch, which really isn't a ban at all. And then there's been a lot of heated conversation in the newspaper whether we needed to move forward and to make this ban on cell phones. Was it actually contributing to poor behavior, less learning in the classroom, or the counter argument, of course, would be that it's actually a great tool and we should learn how to use it and learn how to make sure students know how to use it. Early on in my teaching path, I could tell you that I was really pro cell phone, but of course, as I sort of jotted down some notes, Pav, I realized the context of your schools, the resources available to your schools are going to impact your decision on cell phones.
Yeah.
And so early on, I was pro cell phone. I was pro bringing your own device over the notion of one. It provided you access to technology that the school couldn't provide for you all the time. You were able to use apps that you were comfortable with. So there weren't those sort of learning blocks or production blocks on having to learn new and different software. And so I was really comfortable and really articulate that cell phones were a must. I always told students, your cell phone should actually just be on your desk. It's like your planner. You should have access to it all the time. As I've aged, or as I've seen things change, or as our schools and our boards have become much more heavily invested in that tech space, our board is a virtually, not every grade, not every school, but predominantly it's a 1-to-1. Certainly our school is a 1-to-1 ratio.
From grade 5 and up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you can always depend on a student having a Chromebook in that space. Mm-hmm. And when you think about class resources, yes, my classroom budget's not a lot for the physical things I need to buy. But when you go through what your board is offering to you in regards to those investment in programs and apps, it's really robust with us. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about students having access to multiple platforms, multiple programs, our board's exceptionally good at giving that 1-to-1 and those vast resources. And so my take on the cell phone is altered and changed, and it's in flux. And one day I see positivity and another see I don't. And so when I think about banned, do I want it banned? I probably say I don't want it banned, but I want to know there's a hammer to come down if anything gets out of control, because I think we all know as classroom teachers, the cell phone is high risk, high reward. And I think in today's landscape of teaching, there's not a lot of supports for teachers if something goes wrong in the space. So if you don't have those lockdown supports behind you for when something erodes because of a cell phone, and there's all kinds of issues that can break down with a cell phone, then I would say it's probably better to ban it.
Yeah.
Because most teachers will probably tell you that they don't feel supported and they don't feel support will be there, and they don't feel there'll be institutional support if something goes aroused with that cell phone. And so in that game of teaching, this is when you are in a silo. If you can't necessarily guarantee your safety, then you can argue, and a good argument, I would never be angered at teachers as I want them banned. And simply, and if the only argument was for their safety of something happening, I'd say, okay, yes.
Yeah, it's a very tricky one. Now, you're a grade 8 teacher. I'm a grade 6 teacher. I don't see as many cell phones. Not to say that there aren't any cell phones in grade 6, but there aren't as many as in grade 7 and 8. You start to see more of them in grade 7 and 8. I am, as a grade 6 teacher, very much just on the fence about it because not very many students have them in the classroom space. They don't pose as much of a problem in the classroom space. I will say this, though. Grade 6, 7, 8, they are not able to make the decisions and do the planning and prioritizing that is necessary in order to keep themselves from the distractions that cell phones offer in the classroom. So do I feel like they are at all a useful tool, especially when we have access to technology in the classroom in the form of Chromebooks or iPads or whatever it is that we have in our spaces? I don't personally feel like the cell phones are necessary. So they should stay in pockets or in lockers or in spaces where they're out of sight and out of mind, because they're just not needed to complete the learning that is happening in the classroom space. There's nothing that I do in the classroom where a cell phone is necessary. We have access to everything on the computers that we have in the space. Students bring them every single day. They all have access to their own computer. They take their computer home with them. They bring their computer back to school. Now in grade 6, grade 8, that one-to-one program hasn't reached there. It'll reach there next year. So by grade 8, they have their one-to-one devices as of next year. As of right now in grade 6, every student has their own computer. There's no actual need in the classroom for the cell phone. And when I have been in a classroom space where cell phones are much more readily available for students, I see very poor decision-making abilities being executed by the students in the classroom, because they just don't have that ability. Prefrontal cortex, as we know, is the area of the brain that planning and decision-making, these things are happening in the prefrontal cortex. Our prefrontal cortex doesn't actually become fully developed until our mid-20s. Mid-20s. Mine just developed last year. So it is like they just don't have the ability to regulate themselves, to stop themselves from making those kinds of poor decisions in the classroom. And we blame all of this antisocial behavior. It's actually physical. It's actually brain development. They just don't have that skill yet. And to tell them to, keep your cell phone in your pocket, this is something that is a highly entertaining device that we have at our disposal. I myself am guilty of just sitting on my phone scrolling through social media for hours if I don't regulate myself. And so to say that students should have free access to this, I think is a little bit it's a little bit detrimental to teen development and the stages that students are at right now. So I actually, with the access that we have, and you've mentioned this already, to technology in the classroom, I don't even think that they're necessary anymore. And I agree with you. A few years ago, I would have said, yes, give them the access, because we don't have enough computers for everybody in the classroom. But now I don't feel that way.
Pav, you brought up some great points. I thought of two things as you were speaking. I thought of the thinking classroom model, because you said you don't need them. And someone that probably doesn't teach is going to say, oh, but they could use them better. And maybe that's true. And a reason I make this connection to thinking classrooms, think groups of three. I'm sure statistically, groups of three are the most, valuable combination. But how much more valuable are they than 2 or 4? Because that data is not available. So when someone argues that they're better with their phone, maybe they are. How much better are they with their phone that it outweighs all the negative spaces or distractions that phone can become, i.e. something we haven't really talked about explicitly, shooting video, taking pictures, being on your Snapchat, listening to music. And, I'm a big fan of music, but when you let students pick their own music on their phone, it can take it consumes them.
Yeah.
It becomes the only thing they do. And so as an adult, maybe I can regulate a little bit more. I put on my favorite playlist and I go. Yeah. For a student, once they get the option to listen to music, predominantly, I know in my class, when we were talking about this episode, I started to, a little bit of tally data. There'll be 1 or 2 that can simply play music and just listen to music.
Right.
As a background. And predominantly the rest of them, if music becomes the focus, that's all they're going to do. Right. Play a song, share with their friends, stop, play it back over again, and it just derails quickly.
Or they decide, I'm not actually really loving this playlist. Now I need to go find another
something
one.
else.
Yeah.
So the notion of need it, okay, maybe let's say they do need it. Maybe they could use it. Maybe they do use it better. Do they actually use it good enough that you can justify all the negative things that go with it? Now, someone's going to deny that those negative things exist. And I'll tell you in the middle school space that most kids that are on their cell phones, they're not necessarily doing bad things. They're just not doing the thing. Now, someone who's not in the classroom will tell me it's because I haven't hooked them. I haven't engaged them enough. But if you bother to look us up, check my receipts, you'll find that I'm actually a pretty good teacher. In fact, statistically, I'm an elite teacher. And you know what happens with the cell phone? This is what happens with the cell phone. It becomes a talking point, and it becomes, as I talk about my students, I don't want you to put me in a position to nag you, because one of the things I think I do really well in class, eliminate any type of transition or moment where I need to just control your behavior. But the cell phone, for the reasons you talked about, it becomes one because it's an uncontrollable urge to be on it. And why? Because this is what apps do for young users and old users. This is exactly what they do. Their algorithms, they're designed by smart people, and they know they can capture youthful minds. And so I'm not going to be able to break that down when in a class of 30 by saying, don't be on your cell phone. You know why you should be on your cell phone. Let's use that for the proper learning. That's not going to happen often enough. And Pav, my second point is that I've used them this year. I haven't banned them. I've tried my best to try to teach to my philosophies that I want to believe, that I want to work. But I've also discovered that as sort of liberal-minded as I am as a teacher, a lot of these strategies in practicality don't work, and they become the bearer of some of my frustrations. A cell phone is one of them. For every good moment, this is not a statistic, this is just, and I'm going to go to some of my anecdotes afterwards. For every good moment, there's 10 bad moments.
Right.
And so I'll think about one project we were doing recently. I was doing the Marvin Gaye What's Going On, and our culminating project was they had to make a music video. Now here, a lot of questions from students with their phone asked me, could they use their phones to make the video because they weren't as comfortable in WeVideo. I don't know if that was the specific reason, but they wanted to use their CapCut because they wanted to use their TikTok stuff. And I said yes. And I can tell you now that the project's been sort of past due, and you've got your 6 or 7 kids that haven't finished. Now, of all the kids that did it on their cell phone, only one submitted it. The kids that were working in the WeVideo space did get it done. Now, this is where the sort of the manipulation of the data comes. Is the one kid that did it was a student that often doesn't do a lot of work. This was his shining moment. He excelled. The video's fantastic. And he did do it on his phone, and he was engaged in it. So I love it. I want to celebrate it. But I also think that in the argument of the cell phone, the people that take these anecdotal moments over-exaggerate how many students operate like this and take this type of device and use it to this grade. It becomes the smoke and mirror game that you can guilt me or gaslight a teacher by showcasing this particular event while hiding all the other data as everyone else in the class that uses a cell phone absolutely couldn't be bothered to finish it. And ultimately, when I go back and I go through the 6 or 7 of classroom working hours, I can say those students sat on their cell phone and watched TikToks and talked about, watched their playlists or sent themselves Snapchat messages or quickly went on AI technology to work on some assignments, and they didn't do the video. But I doubled down on, I'm going to let them use their cell phone because they're insistent that they can create this video from there. And the data, the hard data there is that most students at a vast great percentage didn't finish. And in comparison to the students that used the one-on-one device and used the Wii video space that they were new to or new-ish to, were able to complete the project. And this is a high-end project where the cell phone plays right into their wheelhouse, and they still couldn't get it done. But I had the one superstar finish, which I think clouds people's judgment into the impact of this cell phone, because I would say non-classroom teachers will simply go to, say, like a presentation or a keynote, and they'll highlight this one great anecdote the same way I want to highlight it, but then misuse it as to misrepresent how with an elite activity in a student's cell phone, this is what they'll produce, when just underneath the surface, the amount of percentage don't really dictate that I should have done this. Actually, if I had been more forceful with the Wii video space, I would have got more completion, I think. Now, not that that is the ultimate gauge of something, but in this conversation of cell phone, the students that were so keen on using cell phones and using the apps they knew how to use, they didn't do it.
Yeah. You had an outlier. You had an outlier in your class that becomes the talking point. I totally understand what you mean. 100% I agree with you. I will say though that because I can't really speak to this the same way that you are, because I don't have the same thing happening in my class. I don't have students saying, "Oh, can I use my cell phone?" But I do have students saying, "Can I use such and such site?" Or software rather than the one that you have recommended. Like we have access to WeVideo for audio and video editing as a platform for that. We have our access to that. So students and teachers have premium access to that. I have students in the classroom that have been using other editing software to create their own videos, but on their Chromebooks. And they have asked, can I use this instead? And they do a great job with it. And I'm very impressed by what they produce. And they do a great, this is what they're more comfortable with. And I allow them to do it. I will say in grade 6, they don't have cell phones as much. I would say maybe 20% of the class has a cell phone. And they don't pull it out in class. I rarely ever see a cell phone in class. I think in grade 6, they are still a little bit more compliant, when it comes to rules like this. And cell phones might be something that if they do have one, it's fresh. They've just received it. There's more rules, attached to the use of the cell phone. They might not have a voice plan. It might just be like Wi-Fi enabled, and maybe they don't have it set up and whatever to the school Wi-Fi. So there's not as much value for a grade 6 student. But what I do see is students becoming very distracted because their Chromebooks have become their cell phones. Because they're using their Chromebooks to do everything. You can still watch TikToks on a Chromebook. You can still be watching the short form videos on YouTube on a Chromebook. And as you mentioned already, these are videos and video formats that are meant to engage users, not just teenagers, not just preteens, adults as well. And they are very good at doing what they do, is engaging you and keeping you in the app and keeping you scrolling. And it's not just the short form videos, it's the music, as you mentioned before, right? Students don't need to be listening to music only on their cell phone. They pull up YouTube and they pull up these playlists and they have access to the music on YouTube as well. And very often I am walking by students and I'm seeing them playing games when they should be, paying attention, or they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing when they're supposed to be working on a learning task. And so there's still those same reminders. Okay, let's get back to what we're doing. All right, everybody's going to be turning their screens to face the back, and I'm at the back of the room so I can see what's on everybody's screen. Computers have to be on top of your desk so that I can see what you're working on. And these are things that we don't want to be doing as teachers. We don't want to be be monitoring these little things. We want them to be engaged in the task, but in reality, it's not what happens. Because they're kids and they don't have the ability to regulate that behavior as well yet. We have to help them through that, or we have to help them get through this phase so that they get better at it on their own as their brains develop a little bit better. But I wanted to throw another wrench into the conversation. This whole idea that students are coming back from the pandemic a few years behind when it comes to antisocial behavior. So, students who are entering grade 6 might be coming into grade 6 at a grade 4 level socially. And I think that is a very valid conversation to be having around the use of technology in the classroom, because we talk a lot about the digital footprint that students are leaving. And do students at the grade 6, 7, 8 level really have a true understanding of what that means and what it could potentially mean for their future? And a conversation that I had with my student teacher a couple of weeks ago, does it even matter anymore? Because this whole idea of, having access on or becoming viral or saying something that people will listen to on social media, whether it's good or bad, seems to be what everybody is going for. And we talk a lot about, well, you don't want some of these bad things to exist in your digital footprint when you're an adult and you're applying for jobs. When they are applying for jobs, will it even matter anymore? Everything will be so out in the open that it's more like, actually, I'd rather all of the bad stuff be out there so I know what I'm getting into when I hire you for a job or whatever it might be. Or does it even matter anymore? Does the digital footprint matter anymore? I see a lot of stuff on social media that I'm like, wow, you are a very young person, and I am very surprised that you put this on social media. Like, it makes me wonder what your work life is going to be like in the future. And then I ask myself, will it matter? Will it matter in 15, 20 years? Or will the environment have changed so much that the digital footprint doesn't mean the same thing to these students as it means to us currently? I know I went off on a bunch of different tangents there.
That's a hot take. I like the fact that you talked about that the students have learned. We talk about the difference in bringing your own device because you're more comfortable with it. I think there's a certain level of competency with Chromebooks, although I've gone counter argument on this before. They're not as good in these spaces as we think they are. They're very good at consuming content. They're very good in their Chromebook at finding places to consume, I would argue for most people, low resolution, simplistic content. Pav, you talked about that digital citizenship. I really like that conversation. I hadn't thought about it a lot because when I look at my middle schoolers, they're not like, I'm trying to convince them to create content. So before 6 people have called me the worst teacher ever, I try to use this type of space to create learning moments. So I have reels. I play reels all the time. So rather like draw them towards math reels or reels on, philosophies on life. And we discuss it. We break them down and we talk about how they're filmed and we talk about how they're shot and we talk about their impact. So I don't try to block this space. But you talked about content creation. I strive so hard to make them want to be content creators, but predominantly they're content consumers. So I don't think of that footprint because I don't see them leaving a footprint. I'm not talking about the content, the footprint of the content that they intentionally are creating. I'm talking about that footprint of the cyberbullying or, like leaving really harmful comments on people's content on social media or creating retaliatory TikToks or that sort of thing, like the antisocial behavior. The engagement of other people's content.
It's the engagement, but then also like not really thinking before you create content that is going to last forever, because that happens a lot. And it's often that type of content that goes viral. And that's what you're known for now, right? And so I feel like there isn't as much conversation around that type of content that is created. I know that you do a great job. I include a lot of reels and TikToks in my lessons as well. Students create a lot of content in my class also. But we've had conversations about digital citizenship in class and what it means to post things that are harmful, like sending pictures around of students that you have taken without consent, or, the cyberbullying, or leaving like really, really nasty comments on people's posts on social media. Like, what can that do to you? And I don't feel like students really have a strong understanding of what that means and what it could potentially mean. And we've talked about that before, where, should we have police officers come into the school and talk about, what are the consequences of posting things like that on social media, because you're doing it from behind a computer or behind your cell phone. It's much more easier to say nasty things or mean things about other people without thinking of the consequences of that. But do students even really care? Like, do they care about what happens or what could potentially happen to them afterwards? Are they learning those lessons? Are we teaching them in a way that is meaningful, where they actually understand what this could mean for them?
Well, that's a real challenge in the K to 8 space, because we're not really, and don't, someone will take it the wrong way, but we're not really about consequence. And so there's a philosophy of
but consequences are real.
Yes, I think of our students, they float around with they don't believe in a consequence because they've never dealt with a consequence. Because there's always, I'm sure for sometimes there's justification for being lenient or being restorative,
right,
or affirming what was going on, or the behaviors, some means of communication. I'm sure there are, but I'm also sure there are moments where actions need consequence. They don't even need to be harsh consequence. There has to be a clear consequence, a clear idea that if something happens and you're responsible for something, something's going to happen in response to that.
Accountability, right? Because accountability exists for everyone. For everyone. When you're an adult, you are accountable for your behavior. And
so I don't think, when you think about that students comprehend, I don't think they are fully aware of the accountability concept, because I don't think they've practiced it enough. They haven't been a part of enough situations where there are accountability. Mm-hmm. And it's... Pav, you got me thinking a bunch of different things. I'll come back to the Chromebook component. The Chromebook can be just as devious as the cell phone.
Yes.
And it reminded me, as you were telling that story, that my class, we took a 2-week tech break this year. And I had gone in with a bunch of my, A+ projects, tech projects, tent-oriented, project-based learning, and I spent my time, it's a project where I feel I'm used to floating around, giving productive feedback, observing what students are working on, and I realized I was just walking around the room nagging people to get focused, to get on task. And it wasn't negative. I don't have a student that ever refuses to put their cell phone away. And even if we have it on the board and we talk about how it's not a cell phone period, I still have to remind people 10 times. But in a 40-minute period, if I spend 30 seconds, and it's always more, reminding people 10 times, I'm eating 5 or 10 minutes, because it's more than 30 seconds, of my class just reminding people to put the cell phone away. And we've had this conversation in class. I'm a pretty valuable resource, but it's a complete waste of who I am if I just need to go around the room monitoring these type of things. And so as a class, we've had these really explicit conversations about the classroom dynamic, the learning dynamic, cell phone or Chromebook. What happens when I'm floating around to give feedback, to guide you in a project, and all I have to do is ask you to close X tab XYZ. I ask you to put your cell phone away. I got to repeat because you got your headphones in. You can't hear me. I got to do that again. And then I go to the next group and I do the same thing. And then I look back over and the person has drifted back into those spaces. And it's never negative. I haven't had a negative interaction with a student over this, but it's something where I realize that most of the day, this is what I'm doing in these spaces. Mm-hmm. And so our class collectively decided we were going to take a tech break. And it was astounding how much more engaged and focused, and maybe solely because there was no distraction. Mm-hmm. You know what? If you have a sticky note and I'm asking you to put the sticky note up on a chart paper, it's working a lot better than getting you to put a sticky note in the Jamboard. And I hadn't necessarily had those troubles before. Maybe the classrooms were a little smaller, the dynamics were different, but it was astronomical difference. And so the class picked up on it. They enjoyed it. They asked for more of these type of tasks. And so we've done that. But I also went back to the digital space, because it's also I have to be accountable to teach them these skills. It's not about not teaching them how to learn these spaces, but putting them in these spaces. And it comes back to a point I made earlier and a point we've made before. There's a lot of false narrative that students are all very good in this space. They're not very good in these spaces when you talk about the vast programs and softwares they have. They're very good at a few, and mostly they're just good at consumption of one or two. And that's how they use their cell phone. They haven't, or Chromebook. They haven't opened up their eyes. I just think when you, Pav, you bring those good problems up, is that the problems of what can happen to cell phone are also the same in the Chromebooks. I even think of students taking pictures and videos of people on their Chromebooks.
Yes.
It's not quite as easy to do, but when you think about, it's funny, we get into big arguments about the privacy factor of ChatGPT and signing up and are you 18 years or older, but then we let people walk around with cell phones. I'll tell you right now, that cell phone and that video and that camera is a lot more privacy invading than whether they signed up for ChatGPT and aren't 18 yet.
Right.
Not that you should. I'm just saying we it's, again, smoke and mirrors. We pick issues that aren't really the problems so that people that aren't in the classroom can fixate and make these the issues. The issues, the camera, instantly gets pulled out to videotape stuff.
Right.
And then what do you do with that? Like, because I can tell you to delete it, but I know it just goes in your garbage can. I can tell you to delete it from your garbage can, but do I really have the ability to say, show me your phone? Because if that student goes and makes any sort of complaint, and then again, like I said at the beginning, am I safe from this? I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm going to be left on my own, and someone's going to say, you can't ask a student to do that. And they're probably right. So you're putting the onus on teachers to make tough decisions and force things when the system in and of itself will not support the teachers doing it. They make these rules and regulations, and we know that the teachers will go down. And this is why teachers are afraid of these things, and probably rightfully so, because we're going down if something goes wrong. And every teacher that's been in an experience will tell you there is no human being that will come to support you. They will look at rules and regulations and paperwork, and that's it. So when people want when a classroom teacher wants a phone banned, I get it. But I don't know, Pav, where do I want to go from here? You talked about the Chromebook. I wanted to talk a little bit about mental health. I had mental health in my notes because it's documented that students are feeling more stress, more anxiety than ever before. Mental health is a pressing issue, but actually not that it's going to be a connection. It's not causation, but it does happen to go hand in hand with the abundance of cell phone use, the abundance of cell phone acquisitions. And so we know that the cell phone is impactful on students' mental health on a negative way.
Yes. 100%. That is documented, and that is 100% true.
And I think students got caught, instead of living life, they get caught watching life. And then they create a bunch of false scenarios of what life's supposed to be like, and they set up their own stresses and anxiety because they don't match what they're seeing, which is a complete and utter fabrication. And so if we're truly committed to students' mental health and social emotional wellness, I guess we need to teach them about these things, but we also need to be really open about how they're completely and utterly detrimental to your growth.
Right.
And your mental health. So if you're a mental health advocate, don't you instinctively need to be, I don't necessarily go so far as banned, but highly, highly regulated.
Highly regulated, but then also teach students about the mental health concerns as well. Just talk to them about why those mental health issues exist around the cell phone and around social media, especially for girls at these teenage and preteen years. It's highly detrimental. And it's important to talk about it with them so that they know, where these regulations, or why we're talking about banning cell phones, and why we're talking about the fact that it's such a distraction, and why we're talking about how it's leading to these horrible mental health issues in teenagers. We need to be talking about it. I struggle a lot with when to do it. I feel like there's just not enough time to even have community circle in my class and talk about things like, what's bugging you, or what's happening in the classroom? How are we getting along with one another? And where's all of that happening? And how am I supposed to work in these additional conversations that need to be had in the classroom, that need to be had in general with kids at this age? But when do we do it?
Yeah, now we're talking about system structures. This is great because everything here has been on the burden, the shoulder of teachers. And Pav, I've brought up this conversation a few times. And your just point right here, if we're really committed to these social, emotional learning, student mental wellness, maybe part of that is making structural commitments in our school structure. So how do you do that in a K-8? Maybe K-8 shouldn't be doing any Rotary. Maybe there's real value because we understand the power of relationships. And yes, you'd like to have as many different relationships as possible. But I think as classroom teachers, we can tell you that when we have our own home room, especially as a middle school teacher, that those bonds are much more powerful. The learning, the in-depth learning, these type of moments, this type of learning, these type of harsh conversations, hard truths conversation, they're well received and they're easier to have because they are tough conversations, but you've built a relationship with your class, perhaps a commitment to not just switching all these classes all the time for math or language or science, especially in the K-8, because the curriculum's not so tough that you need a science expert to teach the science.
Right.
You don't need a history expert to teach the history. You can learn it and you can teach it. And so there's more value. Again, it's like the thinking classroom, my example. What has more value? And I think you have more value when you have your class all day because it allows you to deal with these moments. When you have a class that you're losing in 40 minutes or in 50 minutes.
You can't. There's literally no time.
Those kids subconsciously know they're leaving.
They're leaving. That's right. They've already set themselves up to transition to another space in 40 minutes.
So what's our system doing to better support these issues? I would argue that's one.
So we had this year child and youth counselors that came in for 6 weeks, once a week, and had conversations about digital citizenship. Fantastic conversations in the moment. But again, after 6 weeks, there's no follow-up. It's again left to the classroom teacher to continue that follow-up conversation. And I would love to, if I had one, we have to sacrifice our instructional time for math to have the child and youth counselors coming into the classroom to deliver this learning on digital citizenship, which I think is an important conversation to have. It was a great program, but it is impinging on math instructional time, which I have to now cover at a different time, which I don't have. Right, because that time was taken out of instructional time.
Especially when you have multiple math classes.
That's right. I have 2 different math classes. So one class is being sacrificed that time. The other class is not. So there's that. And then on top of that, when the child and youth counselors leave, their wonderful program has been delivered. It's not like the learning is now cemented and now it's done. There needs to be follow-up. There needs to be further conversation. And I would love to be the one to do that. But I have to go back to that instruction of math. And so when am I able to follow up on those conversations? Sometimes I have those conversations with students one-on-one, casually, informally, outside at recess, whatever the case might be. Or it might be a situation where there is a consequence and I have to have that conversation with a student and we have to talk about the learning that we had. But it's not in a community forum. It's not the way that I would like in a way that I feel is resonating with students. And so 100% I agree. These are resources that continue to be cut from classroom spaces. We don't have guidance counselors anymore. We don't have those supports that exist in the school setting where it was like, you can go and talk to that person and gain some insight and have that little mental health break and have someone to talk to when your brain is just doing a million different things and can't focus on one. These are all burdens now, as you said so eloquently a number of times earlier. They just don't exist anymore. Like we don't have the ability to do it. The burden just falls on the teacher over and over again.
Great conversation, Pav. Are we ready for a commercial break?
I think so.
Because remember, we said this one was going to be 30 minutes.
30 minutes plus 25.
And you're listening to the Chey and Pav Show. Teachers talking.
Teaching.
Get your hands up to the floor.
You're listening to the Chey and Pav Show.
And this episode is brought to you by BlackBerry. Get your child a refurbished cell phone for all their learning needs.
Get your hands up to the floor.
You're listening to the Chey and Pav Show. Did you ever have a BlackBerry?
A word from our sponsor? No, I'd never had a BlackBerry.
No.
But
No, you have. You never did?
no,
You never had a BlackBerry?
no,
With the full keyboard?
no.
You missed out.
But in my grade 12 accounting class, my culminating project was to evaluate the stock value of a certain company. And I don't know what company BlackBerry destroyed, but whatever company it was, I gave a project saying to invest in them because the stock was low and it was going to rebound.
Oh, and?
I passed, but clearly a horrible mistake. No one ever came back from that. And I guess BlackBerry eventually fizzled out itself.
Yeah.
We've been talking about cell phones. By an extension, we've been talking about technology. And Pat, we've had a lot of great conversation and a lot of different themes emerging. I don't know if you want to come back to anything specifically. I've sort of hit on the key points I wanted to. Understanding why a teacher would be uncomfortable, the disproportionate burden on teachers to deal with, sort of feeling the loss of a teacher, just even if it's not a negative experience, it consumes a lot of time to redirect. And you brought this up that at this age, students just don't have that ability to self-regulate yet. So yes, are we teaching it? Of course we are. Then we talked a little about the structural changes that need to happen to allow us to have these enriched classrooms where we can get beyond necessarily the curriculum to this type of curriculum where mental health, where these things do fall through the cracks, and they certainly do in a middle school experience when you're doing a lot of transitions. Now there's value there, but again, what is more valuable? A hierarchy of needs. I know in education you're not allowed to have hierarchies, but predominantly our society functions on them, and it functions really well with them. So it's really important as a classroom and as a school to have a hierarchy of needs and what is more important in regards to that cell phone use. And so whatever benefits can come from the cell phone, one could probably create a hierarchy that other things are just more pressing that need to be contained and dealt with.
Well said, Chey. I think that covers quite a bit. I'm looking through my kind of notes, and I don't think there's anything else that I wanted to add either.
I also just want that mental health component.
Yeah.
Like when we see these numbers going up, I don't want to make some connections that are directly connected, but some psychologists do make the connection that the growth of the cell phone is linked with a lot of student stresses and anxieties because they become fixated on watching life instead of living life, which maybe can be applied to adults, but I guess we make some assumptions that adults have maybe more means or more awareness to be able to break the potential side effects or the potential downfalls. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? I took a little break from social media. I felt like I needed it, and I found that it helped.
Similar to my class, we took a break from tech and it helped.
Yeah.
And we went back into tech and we debriefed and we went through it. And again, this ban on cell phone has really morphed into the technology debacle. And I think there's a lot of false narratives like the one that students are really good in this space, which I think leads into the cell phone argument because the notion becomes students are so good with their tech, they're even better with their own tech. So let's bring it in.
Right.
Well, but that's ultimately not the case, or it's not the case for the majority. It's the case for the outlier that we then use to make sweeping generalizations of, which also brings back to the bring your own device. If your technology learning is dependent on schools bringing in their own device, then we aren't really following the philosophies in which we claim to adhere to, or which our boards and our districts claim to adhere to. Students and teachers shouldn't be shouldering the burden of technology gaps. So if your school is only giving you 15 Chromebooks for your class of 20, but you can cover it through 5, that's not supposed to be how it works. And we give our system a pass and our districts a pass when we just allow students and teachers to bring in their own stuff to fill the gap. Now, we know in the classroom space sometimes, but how many sometimes do we have where we constantly give the system a pass and fool the system into thinking it's working because the next spin is the system's just going to give you more on you because they think the system's working. There is, when you talk about disruption, and I never really call myself a disruptor, I haven't earned that, but I don't give the system a pass endlessly every time something's going to go wrong. Sometimes it's like, what system changes are we making? Because we disproportionately always fixate on what the teacher needs to do in every situation to make it work. And we constantly, I don't want to say never, we never fixate on the other things. Like I could, in context of many different meetings and many different things go on in school, teachers do, teachers do, teachers do, teachers do, teachers, I need you to do, I need you to do, I need you to do this. How about we stop and redo a structure? Oh, duties aren't working? Let's stop and redo the duty schedule. Oh, you don't want to redo the duty schedule. You just want a teacher to just cover it up. Oh, a student is having difficulties. What's your pedagogy? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What do you do when I'm doing all these things?
Right.
Conversation stops because we constantly overly fixate. In districts that talk about looking for disproportionate data, we disproportionately put things on teachers to do all the time to make the system work. So that's off topic, but it's not off topic.
I mean, these are things that require advocacy, right? Like teachers need to speak up about these things. And this is not a new issue. This is an age-old issue, and not just about technology, but about all kinds of issues that happen in the school setting. The teachers shoulder the burden of that. And it's not just the teachers, but it's all of the school staff that end up having to pick up the slack for system inequities, right? And these system inequities exist on all levels. And you know, sometimes I do feel like it requires a really big overhaul, but who's going to do that? And when is that going to happen?
Because it's tough. Even if you think
it is tough, absolutely.
Unrelated, even if you think of classroom resources, you know, every classroom gets the same amount of dollars for their class. But not every class got the same amount of students. And like some's got a difference of 7 or 8.
And not every school exists in the same community. There's a lot of communities out there that are receiving tons and tons and tons of fundraising dollars that they don't even need to tap into their school funds to be able to purchase the technology that exists. Where's the system in making that an equitable space?
Is it doable? Yes. Does it take a lot of hard work? Yes. Would it take investment? Yes.
Yeah.
But no, we won't, because it's simple. So we won't bother.
Yeah.
And it comes down to it. But at some point, we'll ask a teacher to work it out.
Chey, you can do it.
and in my first 22 years, I was like, yes, I can.
Yes, I can.
Are we ready for a swag bag?
Oh, I thought you did the swag bag already.
I sort of did do a swag bag to get it started. So
all right, let's wrap it up.
Definitively, are we banning cell phones, Pav? Yes or no?
I don't think we can. We don't have the power to do that. No, I don't think we can.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. We're not banning cell phones, but they need to be highly, highly regulated. And I think in the notion of not banning them, it's an intentional time to teach how to use them, that digital citizenship component, but also realizing that what we think students can produce in our cell phone is probably far less than as a whole can be produced. And we cannot rely on arguments of using cell phones based on outlier data that's not really reflective of the norms in classrooms. And so you need to ask classroom teachers. I've had a few stunning successes in my class with cell phones, but I've also had absolute failures, epic failures, and I consume a lot of my time in the tech space, expanding beyond cell phone, into management. And I don't want to manage, I want to inspire. So there is real value in inspiring, in finding inspiration. So that doesn't even really make sense in the swag bag, but Pav, maybe you can edit that, or maybe you can't. It doesn't matter. It's in an hour and 4 minutes, and this is teachers talking teaching, and sometimes everything doesn't make complete sense.
After 1 hour, nothing makes sense.
It was just performative. But we're both about regulating our cell phones. We talked about that technology component. We talked about that digital citizen component. And if you really want to hear my swag bag, go back to the 57-minute mark and
There's
listen to it
probably a
back.
better one there.
Don't. I'm the funny one.
Okay.
And you've been listening to the Chey and Pav Show, Teachers Talking.
Teaching. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Absolutely. What are we going to talk about that? Oh, we have a topic for that one. What was it? It's in my notes somewhere. Let me check my cell phone. I've got it there somewhere.